Thank you to Princeton Futures for including Not in Our Town, Princeton. I'd like to mention other board members who are here, Ms. Shirley Satterfield, Mr. Larry Sproul, Ms. Fern Sproul, and Ms. Mickey Mendelson. Our mission statement: Not in Our Town, Princeton is a multiracial, multi-faith group of individuals who stand together for racial justice and inclusive communities. Our focus is to promote the equitable treatment of all and to uncover and confront white supremacy, the system that facilitates the preference, privilege, and power of white people at the expense of non-white people, and pits racial and ethnic groups against each other by upholding hierarchies based on proximity to whiteness. Our goal is to identify and expose the political, economic, and cultural systems which have enabled white supremacy to flourish and to create new structures and policies which will ensure equity and inclusion for all. In our commitment to uncovering the blight of white supremacy on our humanity, we take responsibility to address it and eliminate it in all its forms through intentional action, starting with ourselves and our communities. Our dream and hope is that by the year 2035, Princeton will also challenge systemic white supremacy. A Princeton that does so would ensure that there is sufficient and affordable healthy food, safe housing, accessible transportation, comprehensive health care, and education for all its residents, embracing and supporting them in their complete intersectional identities. We envision a 2035 in which non-white residents are not only welcomed into the culture of the town, but that the culture itself transforms to better reflect the array of values and gifts every resident brings. The Princeton Public Schools' ongoing efforts to have more representation in the curriculum and other programs is an example of how to do this. We envision Princeton in 2035 that is a town which will have courageously faced its hard history, in particular, the harms that were done to the African American community, and made reparations accordingly. Reparations represent a desire to move forward to a kinder future without ignoring discrimination from the past and in the present. Our hope and dream for Princeton in the year 2035 is that we will be using restorative justice practices to help resolve conflicts and heal harms. By working to build community and relationships, as well as resisting a jump to punishment, we can prioritize personal and systemic accountability for racial bias. Our hope and dream for Princeton in the year 2035 is for racism to disappear. But since that possibility is as unlikely in 2035 as it was in 1998, when Not in Our Town, Princeton was formed by representatives of local faith communities, our hope for Princeton is that we use tools that are available, like the Racial Equity Impact Assessment Toolkit that was created by the Civil Rights Commission with the participation of Not in Our Town, to help review municipal work and programs through a racial equity lens, which can affect every aspect of town life, even which streets get repaired first or the hours the pool is open. The dream will only become a reality with the participation of Princeton residents and organizations. Not in Our Town, Princeton is ready to join with others to achieve racially equitable goals. We also invite you to learn with us through our monthly conversations and programs we co-host with the Princeton Public Library, through our Examining Racism workshop, and to work for racial equity through our Truth and Transformation commitment to drive change in Princeton institutions. Thank you.
Next, we'll have the Princeton Environmental Commission, Heidi Fichtenjohn.
Thanks for giving me a chance to talk a little bit about the Environmental Commission. sort of our questions and our vision. You know, New Jersey was a forest back in the 1600s before Europeans came here. And then when they did, they cleared the land for farming and of all the timber. And that took an ecosystem with a lot of eco-services and chopped it to bits. In the 1900s, it sort of started to come back, and there was some regrowth. But by the 1972-ish, you're starting to see suburban sprawl, and that has continued. The EPA has divided the United States into regions. We're in Region 2, that's New York and New Jersey. We are by far the most densely populated part of the country by 2 times any other part of the country in the United States, like over 500 people per square mile, and the next highest is, 230 or something, right? And so it's a real challenge. Not only that, Region 2, the population growth, the land use change and land use cover has been changing at twice the rate as the population growth. So one question that the Environmental Commission has is, what has been our population growth and what has been our change in land cover? We feel that there are a number of questions like that. Or have we looked at the improvement to land value relationship for underutilization of properties in Princeton? Have we mapped these things? Have we looked at the tree canopy in Princeton and mapped that and understood that in certain portions of our community, the tree canopy has not been valued and continues to be not valued. Very importantly, the tree canopy provides a lot of eco-services, especially when it starts getting very hot, right? It provides shade, and it's going to be really important in the future. When you look at communities like the historically African American community and the losses that they've suffered and the care that has been given to their streets and their tree canopy, there's climate injustice, right? The fact that we're starting to look at Witherspoon Street and we've decided that we can't put the utilities underground, and therefore the tree canopy is going to be heavily impacted coming down this main artery that borders and has been traditionally the heart of part of the African American community. What are we doing? What are we saying when we do that, right? So these are all questions that the Environmental Commission has. In addition, and we feel that the master plan needs to provide a lot more graphic mapping as part of understanding and building consensus about what is needed in our town going forward. The words are pretty, but the words don't tell the story the way graphic material does. And we need to come into this century because we have all these technologies and all these new tools, and we need to be using them. Do you know that 50% of commercial space was built before 1980, and 2/3 of it will still be with us here in 2050? At a recent ANJAC conference, a speaker stood up and said, you know, when you find yourself in a hole, the first thing to do is stop digging. Right? So we dug ourselves into this hole, and I've been advocating for a long time for, and the commission, for building differently, for everything we build new. But that's not going to be enough, and the real impact is going to be with our existing building stock. A renovation moves beyond the limitations of current use to create something resilient and valuable. Using a fraction of the materials renovation is a better climate investment because it takes 30 years to recover the first in embodied energy. 30 years. That's going to be 2050. Not only that, it preserves the cultural elements of our community. One last point. There are these new tools. One of them, very important, that I want to introduce to you is called Urban Footprint. What is this? It's a cloud-based tool that has mapped the use of every parcel of land in the United States. And why is this important? It's important because it can look at very quickly several different scenarios for our town. A town in Utah did just that. There's a wonderful case study on it. Go to Urban Footprint and look for it.
Thank you, Heidi.
I just want to tell you what the output of something like that is.
Heidi, please.
Can I just give you, it's one more
Wait.
sentence,
Go
honestly.
ahead. One more sentence, but that's it.
Okay,
Short one.
okay. I'm just trying to find it because I was organized to do this in a different way, okay? It can tell you the distribution, the future distribution of jobs across multiple scenarios, and measure other metrics like transit access to jobs, walking access to parks, risks, resilience, emissions, water use,
Sounds
energy
fabulous.
use. So what we need to do as a town is to look into these new tools and begin to use them so that people understand what it is that we could do and build consensus and support for how we can work in our community going forward.
I'd like to introduce Walkable Princeton, David Ketty.
Thank you. Yes, I'm David Ketty. I started Walkable Princeton back in 2013. I've lived in Princeton, well, first as an undergrad, but then as a townie since 2004. And we live currently, my wife and I, and our 3 kids over on 24 Moore Street. And what do we love about Princeton, Christine and I? We love that it's not like the communities we grew up in. And what do I mean by that? Like today, I walked here. My wife walks to work. I walk to work. We went to the Garden Theater with our kids to see Arsenic and Old Lace on Wednesday. We walked there. Our kids walk to the fountain. They walk to the park. They walk here to the library. We live a different lifestyle. My wife, she grew up in the exurbs. Her parents, immigrants from Korea, she was born, they were penniless, and she was born into a trailer park. But then their dream was to own land, a huge house on a multi-acre lot. But what did that mean for her? It meant she lived her whole life driving 45 minutes to get anywhere, right? That ex-urban lifestyle. So when I was an undergraduate in the 90s, late 90s, we were in a different mindset. We were like, we want to escape suburbia. And so when I moved into town, I was so excited. I love Princeton so much, and I just realized Princeton is expensive. And I was living in this little apartment over in Van Deventer, and it had a leak in the roof. I don't mean it dripped. I mean the water poured down, and there were gaps between the windows, and there was no laundry. And I was paying, mint to live in that apartment. And I'm like, why? I could live on Canal Point, which is eventually my wife and I, we moved out there when we had our first child. I could live there for less money in a much bigger, much nicer, more modern apartment, but I'd have to own a car. Now, why is that? Why is that? And so, so that was one motivation, was just, when I look at the town, like I remember asking Marvin Reed, the former mayor of the borough, who really spent decades of his life getting this built, right? I remember when this was parking lots, right? And over there on Spring Street, it was parking lots. And I remember that fight, and I remember just being so shocked, because people were like tooth and nail fighting for the parking lots. They're like, if we build that apartment, that 5-story apartment building on Spring Street, if we build it right here on Heinz Plaza, it will ruin the town. It will overwhelm the schools. It will overwhelm the park. Has it? It hasn't. Right? Was Heinz Plaza a good idea? I thank Marvin for that. That was a good idea. And when I look at that parking lot out there, you know what I see? I see a future apartment building. In 2035, my hope is that parking lot, now maybe that would provoke you, but that parking lot will be an apartment building, multi-story. And where we won't fight for 20 years over how many units will it have? And how much parking are we going to put on site? Parking doesn't belong on site in the downtown of Princeton. It doesn't belong on site, it belongs in parking garages, as we've seen from this development. So that positive vision for density, that's the word, Ed was referencing, the dirty word. I realized when I came to Princeton, I was coming from a generation that the dirty word was suburbia. Suburbia was boring. Princeton is in fact the happening place. Right outside my house on Moore Street, we're the second free parking space closest to the downtown. When it's most park up is actually Saturdays, right? On Saturdays, that's when the parking is greatest, because people come into Princeton, because what else is happening in central New Jersey? Than what's happening here. And I just want to present a positive vision for that. Driving is easier on National Street than it is in Montgomery or in West Windsor, because there, anytime you leave your house, your only choice is to drive. Now you may be living a suburban lifestyle, and that's certainly enshrined deep down in our zoning code and in our town conversations. We need single-family homes on large lots, and anything else is harmful to me. That is our narrative. And I just want to present a positive vision for density. We call, Sam Bunting and I, who started Walkable Princeton, we call ourselves YIMBYs, yes in my backyard, right? People would challenge us. They thought for sure, we started trying to prevent the downzoning of the Avalon Bay complex, where we're replacing the old hospital. That was our first fight. And people thought for sure we were shills being paid by Avalon Bay, and I was going to get the penthouse apartment. I live in a single-family home closer in than Avalon Bay. I don't need Avalon Bay to provide me housing. But people just couldn't believe it. And so I just want a part of our vision in Walkable Princeton is to cast that vision. We need more housing. If we're going to address structural racism, if we're going to address environmental impact, the only answer I would put to you, the only answer is a lot more housing. And the best place for that housing is close into town. There are a lot of people right now living outside of Princeton, driving in and out all the time, weekends, weekdays, who would rather live in a small apartment. A lot of people are single householders, they're families with no kids, they're retirees, and they'd rather live in a half-mile walk of where we are right here, but they can't afford it. So let's, when we think about the future, let density not be a dirty word. Thank you.
Princeton Housing Authority, Joseph Weiss.
Thank you for having us here. My name is Joseph Weiss. I'm the chair of the Princeton Housing Authority, and I'm also a community member for 30 plus years now. Princeton Housing Authority has been around a really long time, 84 years actually, since 1938. We are a HUD agency in that all of our housing was initially constructed or mostly funded and controlled by the federal government. And that created a lot and creates a lot of constraints on how we operate. But we have 236 units on 5 sites. Reading Circle, which is kind of our main site, has 40 family units and 60 senior units. Hegman Homes, which is Clay Street, everyone probably knows that right off of Witherspoon, has 50 family units. Lloyd Terrace, which is Spruce Circle, also known as Spruce Circle, has 50 senior and disabled units. And then there's Karen Court, which is kind of tucked away off of Alexander Road by the Graduate University Housing. We have 16 family units there. And finally, our oldest units, Maple Franklin, where there are 20 family units. Under HUD, for most of our history, we're pretty much devoted to operating and maintaining the housing that we have. And we were reliant on annual contributions from HUD to do that. And those annual contributions are really constrained by the political process. So often we're really just barely able to make ends meet for most of that time. And not really, without there being any new federal housing program, really not able to expand the reach of our affordable housing. We are overseen by a commission of 7 commissioners. There's another commissioner here, Linda Saprell. And then we have a part-time executive director, and he oversees 5 staff. Things are really about to change, though, with Princeton Housing Authority. And we're really excited about that. And since this is about the future, I think it's really good timing to be here. We recently changed our contract with HUD, so we are currently what's known as a RAD, we're under RAD contracts. And HUD is great with acronyms, but basically what that means is instead of getting an annual contribution, all of our housing units are subsidized on a monthly basis. But more importantly, we are now able to leverage the land that we own and the units, the properties that we own. We can take out loans if we want, and we can then kind of expand our reach. And that really is our mission right now, is to do two things. One is to improve the housing that we have, which is, some of it dates to, Maple Franklin dates to 1938. So it's really old and it's pretty substandard. So we have a lot of work to do just in upgrading our current facilities. And to do that, we need resources, mostly financial resources, and we're now recently able to leverage our property to tap into different forms of resources. In conjunction with that, we are just now starting to form what's called the Princeton Housing and Community Development Corporation. And we're really excited about this because this is going to be a kind of a nonprofit arm of the Princeton Housing Authority. And previously we weren't really able to do this, but now given the change in our structure with HUD, we are. So with this organization, we're now able to raise money, funnel that money in to improve, renovate, rebuild some of our housing that we have. And that is kind of our focus right now, in addition to of course, providing housing and supporting our community members to the greatest extent possible with social services and tapping into all the great community services that exist here in Princeton. But really the most important thing that's happening with us right now is the formation of the Princeton Housing and Community Development Corporation, which is literally maybe a few weeks away from its formation. And our first project is going to be the redevelopment of Maple and Franklin. Many of you may have heard of that. We want to replace those housing units with 160 new units, a 50-50 mix of market rate with affordable on that site in conjunction with the town of Princeton. Thank you very much.
One of the exciting things that you all may have participated in earlier is we had a wonderful team of volunteer architects working with Princeton Future, doing visioning for that site, and it's so exciting to hear that it's moving toward some real excitement and maybe groundbreaking in our lifetime, eh? Okay, that's great.
Hopefully sooner than that.
All right, great to know. Mr. Rogers' neighborhood? Blair Miller.
I'm Blair Miller. We were formerly known as Mr. Rogers Neighbors Kindness Project, which was kind of a mouthful, so we've since sort of dropped off the name of Mr. Rogers, still using him as an inspiration and an ambassador of kindness. And now we're known as Neighbors Kindness Project. For those of you who don't know our organization, the mission is to give local residents a chance to add on meals, products, and gifts for a neighbor in need. So we encourage this by inviting customers who have money to patronize local businesses and add on those products, pay for those products, and then donate them to a neighbor in need. So sort of inherent in this business model is, well, of course, we're fighting food insecurity. We're also increasing revenues and employee retention rates at those local businesses. We brought in $350,000 our first year, helping over 35 local businesses. And then we are helping over 2,000 families in Princeton, where we distribute these goods, these paid-for products for free. But again, inherent in this business model is we're addressing income inequality because there's a huge wage gap. A lot of people don't know on Library Place you can stand in front of a $3 million home, you can walk a few blocks away and be in affordable housing. So something that I really care about is the opportunity of bringing people together. It's something I've always cared about. I worked for Ralph Lauren, actually I've lived here 16 years. I used to work at Ralph Lauren and right when I was in college on Palmer Square. And I learned a lot about sales, how to increase, push the needle in revenue. And there's sort of this negative view on for-profit entities. Something I'm really passionate about is how to invite for-profit entities to help nonprofit entities and the community. Currently, I'm studying at Georgetown Social Impact Consulting, and what I'm really passionate about is on a bigger level, how can we use our untapped resources in this town? How can we bring companies and financial institutions like BlackRock and other big corporations to help our housing crisis, to help our neighbors in need, and shed light on this huge wage gap that's in our community a lot of people don't know about. Having lived here, like I said, 16 years, something that's really heart-wrenching for me is walking by and seeing all of these businesses, especially as a result of the pandemic, gone black. Their employees, some of whom are now our neighbors in need. So how can we really help our local businesses? And that's something that we want to continue doing at Neighbors Kindness Project, but we also want to do on our larger scale. So in 2035, we see ourselves, me in particular and my team, really bringing together corporations, getting money and using that money for good. And the work I'm doing at Georgetown, a lot of the things we're learning is these corporations, these mega multi-million, billion-dollar companies are committed, quote unquote, on diversity, equity, inclusion. They're committed on social impact. But really what we've been finding in a lot of our research and the work I've been doing is it's more about the brand awareness than the true commitment. So how can we really take their money and do good? How can we really take their money and help our neighbors and kind of connect people with money and people who don't have money? And I think a lot of that has to do with empathy, building trust, listening, and things like this. So thank you so much to Chuck and Sheldon and Princeton Futures for giving us an opportunity to hear our voices. And if we continue to let other people talk and hear people in need as well, I think that's really important as well.
Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you.
Have you noticed that McCaffrey's in the shopping center has had a little brown bags near the checkout? And it would say, you know, this bag is $9 or this bag is $12. And what it is food that can then be distributed. In other words, you're paying it forward. So it's an extra little bit of money that you leave to buy food for another family in need. Lovely, lovely gesture and makes us continually aware of how many people need things as basic as food. Barbara, are you here? We're going to end our official program with Barbara Prince, who's here for Princeton Senior Resource Center.
I'm Barbara Prince. I've lived in this community for over 40 years. I was on the school board. I've worked for nonprofits, Princeton University, and other educational institutions. And I'm currently employed as a fundraiser at the Princeton Senior Resource Center. Unlike most senior centers, and most municipalities across the United States are required to provide services for seniors. In most cases, that funding comes through municipal tax dollars, either through the Recreation Department or the Health Department, or sometimes the Housing Department. In the case of the Princeton Senior Resource Center, we receive currently about 16 to 17% of our annual budget through the municipal tax dollars. And the remaining 80% is raised through either course fees, grants that I write from BlackRock and Bloomberg and other corporate partners in the area, and from fundraising and from partnerships. We run a lot of programs in partnership with the Princeton Community Library. One that's fabulous on Mondays is Princeton Reads. They give little book reviews, they're really excellent. But we also did programs on the African American presence in the Sauerlands. We have 39 classes approximately per week being attended by about 1,200 to 1,400 seniors or their caregivers every single week. We provide, unlike other senior centers, we provide social services. And we do that a lot in tandem with the Princeton Housing Authority and Princeton Community Housing. We are social workers that are on staff at Spruce and Reading Circles, and soon to be, hopefully, at the Pearl Center. rural housing, which is going up on Terhune. And one of the reasons that it's really, really important to have a senior center in a community is over 90% of seniors across the nation, the United States, wish to remain in their homes until they die. They don't really want to go to a nursing home. They don't really want to go to senior housing, which is sort of abundant in this community, throughout. But that isn't always possible. It's also really important for those who aren't seniors but are caregivers. I realize that in my own life, I've been a caregiver a number of times and will probably be a caregiver again in my life. It's exhausting to be a caregiver, and Princeton Senior Resource Center provides a lot of that support. And a lot of that importance is to bring in all of these community resources. What is it that the community has that we can avail seniors of for either no cost or very little cost? One of the really phenomenal things that PSRC did, and I do brag, is that within 2 weeks of the pandemic closing most of our buildings, homes, stores, restaurants in March of 2020, Princeton Senior Resource Center had 50% of its classes up online. And the only reason that we could do that is that for the last 10, 12 years, we've been teaching seniors how to use computers, how to get the information on your phone onto your computer, how to get the information on your computer on your phone, how to Skype with your grandchildren, and now how to Zoom with everybody across the world, how to use your medical portal, how to do online banking. I mean, I never had to do online banking before March 2020. I don't know, maybe I was really behind the times, but it's now part of our lives. We incorporate it, and we were able to maintain our attendance records and our levels being almost entirely online through Zoom for the last 2 years. It is vital that we make sure that seniors' needs are needed. Our sidewalks, for those who are interested in walkable Princeton, should not be 4 feet wide. They should be 6 feet wide. That's the nation's standard. That means that you can ride a bike and have 2 little kids walking at the same time on the sidewalk. I know this because I live near Middlebrook School, and I see kids riding all the time in the street and cars zooming away and not making attention to them. It's really important that we have mass transportation, and I want to thank this community because the Muni bus, which had been the Marvin, is actually coming up to our new center, which is on Poor Farm Road, 101 Poor Farm Road. It's sort of at the intersection of Princeton Avenue and Bunn Drive, where that little tiny cross street is. That's Poor Farm Road. We have the municipal buses coming up there, and we also, as soon as we have enough transportation, we're hoping that Mercer County Transportation will actually run, I think it's the 605 bus, but it might be the 604, 606. Forgive me, I don't know exactly what the number is. But we recognize that that's incredibly important, that not everybody drives. We also run the Crosstown Service, which provides vouchers at $3 for people who don't drive to have taxi service throughout Princeton.
Wrap, please, Barbara.
So thank you very much, and thank you for having this meeting.
And Barbara reminded us how important transportation is for people of every age in this community, and we really need to think about being smarter and walking more. So, with that, we have a few minutes for some questions and hopefully some answers.
Dan Shambi. I'm I think a 28-year resident of Princeton. My children went to the schools here, and we plan to, my wife and I plan to get carried first out of Princeton eventually. The idea is we plan to retire in place. Joseph, some of the discussions have been about increasing housing density, and I was wondering, you having mentioned the property zone, that Princeton Housing Authority manages, is there scope to increase density on some of those properties, perhaps?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. There's
It's a real good question, actually. And actually, starting with our first project, Maple Franklin currently has 20 units on it. And then adjacent to that property, this is the corner of Witherspoon and then Franklin Avenue. And so there's 3 adjacent properties. The first on the corner has 10 units, that's called Maple Terrace. And then the next one has, the next property in has 10 more units, and that's called Franklin Terrace. And then adjacent to that property is that big empty parking lot that was formerly a parking lot for the hospital, now owned by the town of Princeton. And right there, I mean, those 3 properties put together, it's about a 2.6 acre site, and we want to put 160 units of housing on that site, you know, going. Now, not all of that would be affordable housing, and that's an important thing, consideration, like what's the appropriate mix of housing. And we want to move towards a model where the affordable housing is more integrated with market rate housing. We think that's a better model, and I think there's a lot of people who agree with that. So it would be a 50-50 mix. That's the plan for the project. 80 affordable units and then 80 market rate units on that site. So that's the first one. But then many, like Reading Circle, there's a lot of land there and there's a lot of opportunity. But we just, you know, we're just getting going. But that's definitely in the cards to increase the density and increase our housing stock. Because, you know, I think with zoning is one approach. I'm probably taking up too much time, I apologize. Okay. But zoning is one approach, but I think the most effective approach is to just build affordable housing. And I think we're very well positioned to do that, and that's what we intend to do.
You know, one of the things that planners say, which I think is just a wonderful way to express it, is parking lots are land banks. Think about parking lots as places that can be used in a much more effective way. So, other questions?
I'm just going to make a comment about Spruce Circle and many of your other properties. Rehabilitation on those sites is really critical. This could become, just to be a little dramatic, a $100 million project. The land is there, and these units are very old. Clay Street is old. The town needs help to
And
keep
that's
up
why-
its good record.
That's why our mapping exercise that we did the last time Princeton Future got together was so important and will be so important, and you'll see the outcome, the results of that in the fall. But the idea of looking at the town in a new way with new eyes, I mean, that was one of the reasons we wanted to be here today. Heidi.
So I'm sorry that I was a little bit late, but I was really happy to see that there are so many people here and hear, you know, what everybody had to say in their stories. My real concern is that there's a process happening in the town with a consultant right now that's gonna drive our master plan. And even though our master plan is just sort of the guidance, I think it's really vital that that master plan reflect everything that's being said in this room today. And so my question is, how do we engage more directly with that process? How do we all end up in that room with those consultants and with the people who have been appointed to work with those consultants? You know, I attended the first online meeting, but there is no ability for anyone who's not in that little closed group to make a comment, even though I had questions. So how do we do that?
To your point, one of the advantages of having these sessions recorded, and Chuck is here taking pictures of all of you as you speak, is that these recordings will go into a book, which will be available online as the last one, the last meeting is available online. And those of you who have PowerPoints that we were not able to do today, please make sure that Sheldon gets those PowerPoints, because we will include those in the proceedings of this. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I'm Ellen Gilbert, I've lived here 35 years, and my point speaks very much to Heidi's point. There was a letter in last week's Town Topics.
Please hold the microphone up.
There was a letter in last week's Town Topics signed by Louise Curry Wilson, Chair of the Planning Board, and Tim Quinn, Vice Chair, Planning Board, and Chair, Master Plan Subcommittee. And I was hoping that Princeton Future would respond to it, but since you didn't, I'm going to put it to you here. The letter says, to avoid any potential confusion, the people, organizations, institutions, and businesses of Princeton should understand that the upcoming, quote, Community Master Plan Listening Session, hosted by the private nonprofit Princeton Future, is not part of the municipal master plan update process. And in the next paragraph, they say, again, the process of developing the community master plan is the responsibility of the publicly appointed members of the planning board, not Princeton Future. So I would love to know how you respond to that.
Master plan should be the product of the people of Princeton.
Well, but they've thrown down
And
the
that's what,
gauntlet.
that's what,
What Heidi is
well,
saying is.
Louise Wilson came and addressed our first meeting. She welcomes our input, and we have had a friendly exchange. I invited her here today. She's up in Boston and cannot come. But basically, Princeton Future has been a can opener, and that square exists because of it. The people spoke, they liked our plan, and they built it. It can happen. It's hard, hard work. That's enough.
But this is the work of Princeton Future, and I'm so glad you put your finger on it. And, you know, as with all politicians across the country, sometimes they don't want to hear what the people really do think. But it's very important for us to keep our voices present and make sure, as you suggested, that we get the proceedings of meetings like this and other meetings that we will have in the future to the people who say they are in charge of the decision. Yes, is there someone back there, Sheldon?
Yes, I have some thank yous. I want to thank Mutual Aid because they're the ones I remember who came in our neighborhood and helped during the time of pandemic. I don't know your name, but I just want to thank you. And I want to thank Not in Our Town, Linda. I'm a part of Not in Our Town. In fact, I was a part of it when it started. And they have brought attention to the Lenni Lenape Native Americans. This is their land. When you come into Princeton, you're coming into what used to be the township. And it says Princeton established, I think it's 1863, 16, whatever. Okay, that's because Henry Greenland, who came from England, settled here. He was up in Patterson, he came down here, and he actually settled in the area where the Gillick House is, going into Kingston. So that's probably why they gave that date, because he was the first white man who settled here. But the Native Americans were here long before he was. And they hollowed out the land between the Delaware River and the Raritan River. They hollowed out what is now Route 27, Nassau Street. And from Massachusetts to South Carolina is Kings Highway, and we're part of Kings Highway. So let's give credit to the Native Americans. Another thing, I want to thank Fern and Larry Spool, who have been working with committed and faithful students for years, and who want to work for the betterment of our children in Princeton. I want to thank those of you who are part of community housing and housing authority, because I grew up on Old Clay Street before they built the Haven homes. And so I have a love for Clay Street and all that you're doing to make affordable housing better. And I also want to thank Princeton Future. When Sheldon and Dr. Goheen and Dr. Geddes started that, they had Mr. Hines and me come to give a presentation about the African American community. And I was one of the first members on Princeton Future. And when we talk about that plaza had nothing to do with Mr., even though he was our mayor, Reed. That plaza had to do with the fact that I stood up twice at the Borough of Princeton Council to try to have that named after Mr. Hines, who did everything in Princeton. And those gates, if you look at them, you see the designs that represents his life. And there's a history behind that, and you can read one of the plaques of the 29 plaques of African American establishments in Princeton. So I just want to thank those of you who are here, but my concern is that we don't have a lot of people here. When Princeton Future first started, they started with communities, and all the communities used to meet. This place was packed. And I'm really concerned that people aren't here to hear what's going on, and then people sometimes complain because they don't hear what's going on. And I'm also concerned that people in my community are not here. But they have a history of it always happens. You talk about what we need to do and you don't do it. So they still have that mindset. So we have to get people here who need to be here and to continue this going. And I hope that those of you who are talking about the betterment of Princeton are really real and not just doing it to appease us. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley, for being a historian and the voice of Princeton's wonderful past, and sometimes less wonderful past. Yes, question?
So as I was speaking and heard everybody else speaking here today, it's very clear to me that many of us think in the same way and have the same ideas of where Princeton should go to in the future. And what I was racking my mind about was, why is that not easy? What are our impediments? And I just wanted to encourage, kind of following up on what Shirley said here, encourage you all, maybe many of you have already done it, but maybe not enough, or maybe you haven't yet, to go to council meetings. That's a place where we can be heard. Council, actually, there are no council members here today, but they do listen, and the council meetings these days are on Zoom, so it's easy to go and speak up, and the public does speak up. But not all voices are equally represented there. And I think the majority, I was saying before that PPAC were really worried about the people who don't live here yet. We're also worried about the majority of people who live here and are not heard. And I think there's a majority that would support what is heard in this room, but they are not heard. They and they don't necessarily, as Shirley said, they're not in this room. And so what we wonder about a lot, and I don't have answers, and I'd love to hear from organizations here, is how do we reach out more to the public? And I did manage to look up to find our letter from 2017 online, and it's in Princeton, Planet Princeton, and I saw the comments, and they're horrible. But I think those are minority people that are heard very strongly, and the majority is somehow not heard and not reached out for. So I love ideas on that.
You know, maybe that's something that we can look at, hopefully all together. You've all met each other this morning. Please feel free to exchange information. Think about how you might work along with another organization whose mission is very similar to yours. There is power in being together. There is real power. And there's real power in speaking out, and that's one of the reasons we also publish our proceedings regularly. So check our website, know that we are here. We will not be meeting over the summer, but we will be meeting again in the fall. Tony Nelson, our wonderful board member here, led the visioning process that we did with the maps last month, I think. And that data that is developed out of those maps that maybe some of you participated in is being put together and will be ready for presentation in the fall when we all come back in September. So I encourage you to, as soon as we announce that date, put it on your calendars, come back, be a regular for these meetings, because this is a very good place to be heard and to meet people who are trying to achieve some wonderful things for the community, for the region, for the state, for the country. Thank you all. Please enjoy the morning. Do we have any announcement? This is Tony Nelson, one of our wonderful planners and architects.
First of all, thank you all for coming. It was interesting taking notes this morning that so much of the focus was on housing, which I thought was really quite remarkable. But, you know, in all deference to what's going on in Louise's letter, which I found extremely offensive, right now they're a bit insecure about where they're going, but this master plan requires that there has to be public input. There has to be public input. And so I think it's really important that we stay abreast of what they're doing, because sooner or later they're going to come out of closed session and they've hired a firm to be able to do the public relations. And I think at that point, not only does Princeton Future, but every one of these really extraordinary organizations who is here this morning needs to stand up and talk about the things that they talked about this morning. If they're not going to listen to us, then we've got to go to them. That's pretty clear. And by the recommendation, I believe that they have to have these public meetings. Now, how much they'll listen, that's something else again. But this is our community. We are the folks, I think, who are, I would say, not most concerned, but I think we're the ones who are most concerned. I think the ideas here were extraordinary, but you're going to have to be very careful and be alert, and we'll help that anytime there is a public meeting on this master plan, we attend. And we attend en masse, and we talk about the things that were talked about today over and over and over again until it drums it into the head of Clark and Caton and Hintz that that's what this town wants. And it's pretty clear that that's what we've got to do in the future.
Ask questions, speak up, okay?
The-
Participate.
The one thing that I would say is that a master plan does inform the procedure that is very important to the future of the town, and that's our zoning code. If we can create a set of incentivized zoning regulations that sort of steer the community in a maybe what we might think is a better direction, then that's what we ought to be fighting for. The zoning matters, the master plan comes first. Inclusion and sustainability are on the table, as well as fairness, as well as good relations with our large neighbor over there.
Be informed, participate. Have a wonderful summer, everybody. Thank you so much for coming this morning.